All right, we're live.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome everyone to our conversation on student voting on the Auraria campus. We'll be discussing some important topics today to help provide students with resources and really encourage them to vote in our upcoming election. So I want to start by introducing myself and the folks that are going to be speaking to you all today. My name is Lauren, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the issue campaigns manager for New Era, Colorado, which is a local nonprofit that works to get young people involved in democracy. Since joining New Era in 2018, I've registered hundreds of voters, campaigned for abortion rights, and led on the Youth Agenda Listening Tour, which was a statewide survey of young people to learn about their vision for the future of Colorado. I grew up here in Colorado, and I am a transfer student at MSU Denver, working to get my degree in social work. Today, I'm joined by students from Metropolitan State University of Denver and the University of Colorado, Denver, and staff from the Denver office of the clerk and recorder, Paul D. Lopez. So first, we have Dina Dawson. Dina Dawson is the Director of Elections for the Denver Elections Division. She is a native of Pueblo, Colorado, and has administered elections for over 15 years. She has served as election administrator in Colorado, Oregon, and Nevada. Next, we have Todd Davidson. Todd Davidson serves as the voter services manager for the Denver Election Division. A Colorado native from Southeast Colorado, Todd left a career in private industry to begin a second career in public service at the age of 40. Todd has served in Arapahoe, Broomfield, and is delighted to now serve Denver's voters. Next, we have Antoine Deshawn Johnson, also known as X. X is a Bachelor of Arts candidate in Entrepreneurship and Africana Studies with Metropolitan State University of Denver. X is also a council member with the Student Advisory Council at MSU Denver and the chair of the Student Advisory Committee to the Auraria Board. He also serves on numerous committees at MSU Denver and has plans to become an attorney and pursue doctorates in higher education. And then last but not least, we have Chris Hilton. Chris Hilton is a third year at CU Denver, where he is pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Public Health. At CU Denver, he is the student body president, where he is working to empower the diversity of their student body through civic engagement and student advocacy. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'm really excited to talk to you all today. Just for everyone watching, we will also have an opportunity for questions at the end, but feel free to start putting them in the chat right now, and we'll revisit them at the end of the conversation. So we're going to kick it off with a fun question to get to know everyone a little bit better. So my question for you is, what is your earliest or strongest memory of voting? And let's go ahead and start with Dina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I love this question. And my strongest memory of voting is I was temporarily living in Denver with my partner, but my hometown is Pueblo. And so in our local county commissioner race, there was a valued community member that we wanted to support. We were still registered in Pueblo, so we had to take the time off of work. I'm not sharing my age, but this was back before permanent mail-in voting and voting by mail. So we took the day off, drove down to Pueblo. We waited in line, we voted. And the candidate that we voted for won by 2 votes. So truthfully, if my partner and I had not taken the day off to drive down, it would have been a tie. So if that doesn't explain the importance of voting and that every vote counts. So that's my strongest memory.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Dina. Would love to hear from Todd. What is your earliest or strongest voting memory?
Thank you. My earliest voting memory was a very long time ago when long before computers were used, with an old manual switch voting machine with switches, and you pulled a giant lever and it cast your vote. So that tells you how many years ago I started voting, but it was right at my 18th birthday, my first election.
That's so cool. It's so cool to hear about those past experiences and how voting has changed over time. Okay, we'll go to X. What is your, what is your earliest or strongest memory of voting?
Yeah, thank you for that. My strongest memory of voting, Lauren, was the presidential race that Barack Obama was in his first run as president. At the time, I had just recently completed high school and I was 18. And so it was really exciting for me. I'm like thinking of the nostalgia. I was working as a commercial teller at a bank, had to work 8 to 5. And so I extended my lunch break to make sure that I was able to vote. Now, granted, I did not ask for permission. I did not think the lines were going to be that long. And so this is like my first professional job, and I'm late on my lunch break, but all I knew is that I had to vote. And so there was just this feeling of not only accomplishment, but just this feeling of hope that race left in me, both as someone who voted, but also someone who was like really extending my belief to the changes of our nation with regards to the conversations that were happening with the presidential candidates at that time. And so it was just, for me, being so young, it was very powerful to, like I had just turned 18, to be able to vote in that election.
Thanks for sharing. And it's interesting, we'll get into talking about some of the barriers to voting later, but it's interesting how you talk about, having to leave work and not necessarily asking to leave, but, really wanting to cast your voice. That's really interesting to hear about. Thanks for sharing. And then, yeah, Chris, would love to hear what one of your earliest or strongest memory of voting is.
Yeah, I mean, mine definitely actually overlaps with X. I was 18 during the 2008 election. So that primary, which was really invigorating in general, and then moving into the general election. And that was also the election where, by pure chance, I started the habit of going down to the Denver elections main building and voting in person. So even though I get like my mail-in ballot and most of my friends and family do that, I like sort of the pomp and circumstance of actually going to the main place and submitting it in person. So that like habitual memory is my favorite.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I would love to also share my first or earliest memory. I actually don't remember the very first time that I voted, but I do remember one of my strongest memory of voting was actually when we still had caucuses, right before we moved to open primaries. I remember going to a local school in my neighborhood. I think I was 20 years old. And I went and sat in this room in this elementary school for the candidate that I wanted to be our candidate for the general election. And I remember by like being the youngest person in the room by far, but being so excited that I got to be involved in this moment and have this conversation with other people that were also excited about this. And yeah, it's just really powerful to be able to use your voice. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, everybody. So my next question, which is for Chris, and then I'd love for Dina to add your thoughts as well. So Chris, given the fact that we are currently in the middle of a coordinated election that traditionally has lower voter turnout than larger election years, why do you think that voting in local elections is important?
I think it really comes down to, as we've noticed more and more, so much actual change starts to happen at that local level. So it's whether it's like regulation of our taxes or school board elections, curriculum changes, like that's happening right in our communities that are only in the thousands versus the millions of people across the country. And so a lot of times what I've seen with my friends is they're like, well, I didn't know that was going on. And I was like, well, it happened during, an off-year election last year. And they were like, oh, I thought it was just like every 4 years. And I'm like, no. But I think that just we've realized a lot more and more just how much change can happen in those small local elections. I know, like going to CU Denver, for example, we have a board of regents that's elected politically. And so like every year when those come up and we have those elections, like they're not always on a presidential year election, but yet it matters to us that we show up and vote because they control what happens to our tenure, our curriculum, our tuition rates. And so like that matters. And that's not just happening whenever there's a presidential candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. Dina, is there anything you want to add here about the importance of voting in local elections?
Yes, thank you so much. I would just echo that local elections you're so powerful in local elections. When you're electing your local officials, you're electing the policymakers that are creating the policy that affects you directly. So just thinking about those school board memberships or when you're voting for school district, do you know if the candidate that is running agrees with your mask wearing or critical race theory? Like, do you know that? And then when you're watching school board videos or people are putting on YouTube how school board directors are reacting, and you're just like, I can't believe that someone is saying that or doing that. This is your opportunity to ensure that somebody has the same kind of values that you have is elected to that school board. And that goes to city or county commissioners and to the clerk and recorder and to judges. Judges are retained based on whether or not you elect them or they get enough votes. And so do you know if the judges in your community dole out creative, sentences, or if they, there's just so much to know. So your vote in local elections is so powerful. So I would just echo what Chris shared and just add that.
Yeah, there's so much on those local ballots that's going to, create direct change right there in your community, whether it's the people that you're voting on or, ballot measures that are going to impact, you and your community, your neighborhood. I totally agree. It's really powerful. Before we move on, X, is there anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I think as a member of District 9, which also our school's campus is housed under for the city and county of Denver, one of the things that I can really say that I appreciate around the work of Councilwoman Candy is just the communications. I feel as a resident of District 9, but also as a citizen empowered to really make my vote heard, especially on the local level, and just the dissemination of information. I think at times we don't see the power in our votes on a local level. And I think part of that is around education, and then also communications around elections. I can honestly say, for me, having once been an Aurora resident, now being a Denver resident, just the differences in city to city as far as engagement is concerned. But I would encourage anyone who's watching this conversation, getting involved. It's like, yes, vote, but getting involved is such a crucial part of this election process. And not just like voting, but like breaking down, what does it mean if I give my vote to this or to that? Getting all of the information. I think sometimes the language when it comes to ballot initiatives and those books that come can be a challenge as far as like the digestibility of those documents, because they're extremely dense. But I think when we mix our vote with asking questions and have curiosity, it pushes the opportunity to have robust action, and then also to have resolve and absolve with the results post those elections. So I can honestly say, like, city elections to me, I'm not saying the presidential ones and the unseasoned ones aren't important, but I think the city ones in particular, in my opinion, house such a great implication for the folk. And so I think just as reverential we are about voting for our president, in those votes, we need to be about our city elections. We need to have that same fervency and consistency, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think a lot about how in New Era we talk about like voting is just one way that you kind of, access your power. There are so many other ways to do it. And I feel like voting is, especially in like city local elections, is a wonderful springboard to start to really understand what the conversations are that are going on in your community. And you actually touched on something that's a perfect segue into our next question, which I'd love to hear from the students first. So I'll hear from X and then Chris. So something that we hear a lot of the time is that language on the ballots can be really complicated, and that, researching and filling out your ballot can be very, lengthy and time consuming. So what steps do you take as students to learn about the issues or the candidates on your ballot? And in general, what is your voting plan for this year? We'll start with X.
Thank you for that, Lauren. I personally like to read over everything before I start researching the candidates or researching the items. So I wait until I get my little book from the city and county of Denver. And from there, I start highlighting and posting and writing notes in it, because then it begins, it's kind of like my personal blueprint to figuring out for me what's going on aside from the various partisan ideas that may be spinning around these initiatives. And then I also use Google. I think we're in an information age where you can literally find so much just from using Google or going to, if it's a candidate, going to their websites, looking at people's social medias, seeing what the temperature is with regards to the community. And then also having conversations with friends. Me and my friends, like, we sit down, we talk about the things, how things that may be impacting me based upon where I live may not be the same with them. So we're having like, just kind of like dialogue. And then from there, after I've done all of that, I like to turn my vote in personally. And so there's quite a few places where I can drop that off at, but I guess what I need to know all the details. Like, it's not enough just to be like, okay, like, like the little snippets in the book that try to like summarize the points. It's like, that's not enough for me. Like, this book ain't enough for me. Like, I need to know that I know that I know that I know that I know what I'm voting for. So it's kind of like a whole, like, not dissertation, but in some ways it feels like that. It's like, is it that deep? And it's like, yes, it's that deep. It's your vote. So that's what I do.
Thank you for sharing. Chris?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. I mean, the little blue book is where everything starts for like everyone I know. I know my best friend, who's also my roommate, we essentially, it's like a midterm cramming night. We order Thai food, we have a bottle of wine, and we are sitting there looking through the entire thing. I'm fairly active and read an excessive amount of news, so I know that that helps me a lot in general. I've seen something that was either posted in some type of Facebook group or on some type of social media. So I have those external information that really does help. And it's great when you can take something like Instagram, or even some candidates now have their TikToks, and like you can be like, oh yeah, passively, I did see this like a week or two ago, and I do know what they feel about this specific issue. And that's something that's actually really cool, because even back during like my first election, and I'm sure X can agree with this, like even back in 2008 when we had, super cool Barack Obama, like social media wasn't used as aggressively as it is now to disseminate information. And it's really nice that you can take something that is the formalness of the system, like the Blue Book, and then pair it with what you've passively seen. And yeah, it does take a couple hours, I'm not gonna lie, on bigger years, or when there's more complicated things, or anything to do with taxes, because I'm not good with that whole math thing. But you do just put in that time, and then you feel, at least for that year, that you were a conscious, informed member of society, as cheesy as that sounds.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. And I heard a couple different resources named: your Blue Book, Google, social media, your friends, people around you. Dina, are there any additional resources that you want to share that your office provides that might not have been mentioned, or any other tips for, getting information about what's on your ballot?
Absolutely. And I will say that X and Chris are A+++++ students, because that is not the general response of folks when they're voting. So I'm going to just touch it from the other side of folks that may not be as well informed, because some folks don't even know exactly what county they're in. And if you're in school or you may have recently just moved, you might not be sure. So the first and the most important thing is that you want to always go to your trusted source, and your trusted source for election information is your clerk and recorder's office. There are 64 counties in the state. Some of us are city counties and some of us are just counties. But your county clerk and recorder is the chief election official who administers the election. And so when you need information, we'll throw out the word trusted source. It's the election administrators that are actually conducting the election. If you're not sure who your county or city and county is, you want to go to govotecolorado.com. Go Vote Colorado is such an awesome tool. You can go enter your name, date of birth, and zip code and look up, click the button that says Find My Voter Registration. When you click on that button, it shows you where you can vote, what districts and county you're in. So you can go to that resource, find your county, and then Google is another one of my favorites as well. Just Google your county clerk and recorder, contact the election office, or visit their website. Denvervotes.gov, our website, has a ton of information that we can provide. But when you are voting, it is best to be informed, and the questions are confusing. All counties present a Tabor book, which is if there's a tax increase or it's going to be affecting taxes. But not all cities and counties send out their own version of the Blue Book. So in Denver, we offer a municipal ballot information guide, which kind of mimics the Blue Book you get from the state, but not all counties do. And so it's important to use Google. I like to use specific keywords. If I'm looking at a school board candidate, I might type in school board, Jeffco, Denver, Adams County School Board, and critical race theory, or something that you're passionate about, to see what it's finding for those candidates. But in addition to the trusted source of your county, there are multi-language ballots that are available, or sample ballots for folks that might need a little bit of assistance. There are opportunities for voters that are differently able to be able to log on and vote using their assistive technology. So there are a lot of resources, and you would find those resources for voting at your county's election website. Use Go Vote Colorado to determine what your county is. If you are a student here and you still may be registered in your home state, visit that Secretary of State's office to figure out what your county is, and then follow that same line of logic. But those are some additional resources. But just keep in mind that your county or your county city, they're the trusted source when it comes to information, because as we all know, mis and disinformation is everywhere and it can get tricky. So I would just suggest using the trusted source. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. Yeah, absolutely. Your clerk and recorder's office is a really great stop when you have all kinds of different questions. That website again was govotecolorado.com. And I use that website myself to check where my, check on my registration status and all of that. So it's really helpful. Wonderful. So the next question that I have, and again, I'd love to start with our students, Chris and X. So far we've gotten a lot so far we've gotten a lot of information on the coordinated election and how to prepare yourself to vote. So I'd love to hear from you both about how voter engagement could improve in the future. What do you hope that future voter engagement looks like on campus?
Is this either one of us?
Yes.
So since I went first last time. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chris, and then I will go after him.
That works for me. I think, especially like when you look at the data, Auraria campus at each of the schools, at least I know specifically with CU Denver, we have such a high voter engagement. And that's phenomenal. That's the beauty of being a semi-captive audience, and being at that point where we can have a lot of resources thrown at us. I think what I would love to see Auraria do is take that and spearhead that for the communities we surround. I think we owe it to our, Hispanic communities that we are part of. All of us are HSIs at this point. We should be using that as a resource to get out into the community and engage those voters that aren't just at college. I would really love to see that happen. I think that would also take the burden off of so many of our students who are first gen and have to play that role of translating the ballot to other people. I know, like my grandma, for example, who's a lovely little Hispanic lady, she doesn't understand the legalese of the ballot or the English of the ballot. And so growing up, like having to be that translator times two, like I personally like that because I'm a nerd, but I think we should be encouraging all of our students to take that on. Specifically with the origin stories of Auraria itself, I think it really matters for us to reach out into Hispanic communities and make that voice amplified as much as we can. It's sort of like, we got the campus, so let's make sure we make the community better.
To tag on Chris's point, being one of the leaders here at Auraria and having the privilege and honor to chair the Student Advisory Committee to the Auraria Board, which reports directly to our Auraria Board of Directors, which was authorized when we began the construction of these entities or each of these institutions at our campus. I do believe that because of the authorization of the schools that we all call home and the displacement that took place in order for each of these institutions to be created, we, in my opinion, have an obligation as a result of that displacement to really not only hold accountable the government systems and agencies that at times make decisions but don't always consider the people in the process of making those decisions, but as stewards of this nation, we need to engage both folks who are able to vote and the folks who are not able to vote. I think we need to also have conversations with those participants in our community, because at times I think we forget about that there are other needs of folk in our community who are voting and the processes of that impact. And so I do feel like there's like some bridging opportunities on our campus with both the two SGAs that we have and the Student Advocacy Council that we have in terms of really increasing voter engagement. I would like for each of our institutions to not just focus on the presidential election so heavily, but to also focus on these off-season elections as well. I think what we could also do is workshop these blue books for the city and county of Denver, but also with regards to those 64 counties that Dina mentioned that the state has, I believe each of our institutions has students from those counties. So how can we also workshop each of the counties' little books so that people understand what's happening, and then also have conversations in various types of languages on our campus. I feel like our campus, to me, is a perfect space and place to really, in some ways, be a magnet, not only in terms of political activity, but in terms of voting and engaging the robust community that we have. We have people from every single background, race, gender expression, religious belief systems, you name it, socioeconomic status. We literally, in my opinion, out of all of the places and spaces in the state of Colorado, have the largest home of diversity. And I think if we don't find a way to start really operating in a communal fashion and including some key components, which is democracy in that, And what does democracy mean as a community, as a commune, as a whole, we're really going to do a disservice to ourselves. So I would say that, yes, I want students to be engaged, but I want everyone to be engaged in the voting process. And I think what makes it more comfortable to me is to find someone that you trust and that you relate to and that you connect to begin to have these conversations. And then also, I think we need to hear from the people, like, what are their thoughts on these items? Like, once you have that back and forth, I mean, colleges were created to be a space for discourse. And so I think we can mirror voting and discourse and all of that to really create this elevated experience, which really starts to shift and shape the operations of our state, as well as our nation. Those are my little 2 cents.
Thank you both for sharing. That was really powerful. I feel like there were so many good things to draw out of that, thinking about, the unique position that Auraria is in, and, the relationship that it can build with the community around us, and how we can think about, yes, access for students and for young people, but how do we make that more of an intergenerational conversation? And I agree. I think one of the most powerful things about Auraria is how diverse the campus is. And that means that we can really spark some important conversations. So thank you both for sharing. And I want to give Dina or Todd an opportunity if you wanted to respond to anything that you were hearing.
Thank you, Lauren. I just want to say that I was busy taking notes. Oh, you can't see them because they're just like, I think that you hit the mark and we're here to support. Luckily, our clerk and recorder and his vision, we have a wonderful community engagement team that is here to support, and that's our mission as well. So just for the record, we're here to support that, and let us know what it is that you need and how we can help you carry out that vision. I love the idea of workshopping the Blue Books, and for counties that don't have their own Blue Book guide, I love the idea of being able to reach out and to provide those resources to your peers. So just here to support you.
Thanks, Dina. If I could heart that, I would, but the thing doesn't allow it.
I know I miss our little Zoom reactions. Great. Continuing, to hear from both X and Chris, I also want to know, more about, so based on, voter turnout, we know that voting and staying engaged can be really challenging, a challenging thing to do every year. We'll say we saw in 2020, we saw a record youth turnout, which is so incredible, but there are always, these additional challenges that young people face. So I'd love to hear from you both, and we'll start with X this time, about what are those barriers that you as a young person face, or that you see your peers facing, and what do you think prevents students from wanting to vote?
Ooh, that's multi-layered. I think first, clarity in terms of how we define young people may be a piece of that. I was thinking about, like, our traditional students, that 18 to 24-year-old folk. I think a good portion of our students are still living at home. And so some of the challenge may be that they may be relying on their families or parents to kind of be the enactors of voting. I think also too, with young people in particular, we have to also talk about the difference in generations. If we're talking about, I think it's generation Y, Z, like those younger folk who are now emerging into adulthood, we have to take into account how their lives flow, and what influences them. I think social media is a huge part of it, but also I think we're living in a day and age where politics is so polarized. So, like, being able to disseminate with the information and without feeling exhausted in the process may be part of the issue of why young folk don't engage, because their minds and hearts may be focused on other things. Like, I'm thinking about those students who may not have housing, or those students who may not have employment, or like if your needs aren't being met in your everyday life, you're not going to be considering like to vote. Like that's not going to be your first thing if you're hungry, if you need money or resources. And so I think we have to start baking in voting as a part of our culture, if we're talking about the campus, but also we have to start baking it in my opinion. This needs to start in the like early hood child education and like be a part of curriculum all the way up until the point of when students are graduating, so that they know, um, and young people know, like you have a voice, regardless if you feel like you are being heard or not heard, or whatever the given circumstances, your vote is a part of your voice. It's a part of your agency. It's a part of your autonomy. And so don't ever, as long as you live and exist, not allow your vote not to be heard. And then also scaling that to, it's not to shame anyone, it's just acknowledging, again, we don't have people who can vote, who, in my opinion, everybody, if you're here, you should be able to vote, regardless of your citizenship. But that's a whole nother conversation. The point that I'm making is that our young people, I think part of the reason they don't vote is because they don't feel empowered, and they may not have the support that they need around them to give them the clarity to engage in this process. Back to like, if they don't have food, if they don't have housing, if they don't have employment, if they don't have support, if like things are going on, the polarization, you name it, it can be like, oh, this is too much, I'm not even going to go through that. But I think if we set them up for success by letting them know from like babies that someday you will get to vote, and when you do, express that vote, and it matters regardless of how you vote, whether partisan or nonpartisan, whatever, just doing the act, and that's a sense of engagement and empowerment. I think that's what our young people need. So I'm curious to see, and also I'm curious to hear from them, like, what do they need and how can I be an ally?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Chris, what are your thoughts on the barriers young people face and what might be preventing students from wanting to vote?
Yeah, I think there's, like X was saying, there's like two components to this. There is the disengagement, where constantly we feel like everything around us is on fire. Like, especially being a college student over the last year during COVID, you're like, yeah, I'm stuck in my apartment. The world's literally going through a massive pandemic. We have election craziness. Like, the world's on fire. What can I actually do with that voice? So I think that is one thing that is probably best handled by starting earlier and talking about it. I know like that's was my upbringing. Like, we talked about it like in elementary school, like you cast your fake ballot during elections and stuff like that. And yes, those were for like presidential elections, but at least it started that mindset. And I vote every year now. So, I mean, that's gotta like be statistically insignificant, I guess, in this example. But so I think we have that disengagement. And I think that does happen, like X was saying, by like talking about it younger, acting it out, doing those fake things that make you feel like you are part of it until you're 18 and legally can do it for reals. But I think, like X said too, is there's a lot of structural things. There's not just like, oh, the Maslow's hierarchy, but there's a confusion. Like Dina was saying, like we are commuter schools. And so many of our students are anywhere from Golden to Colorado Springs even. And it's like, they don't know what resources are in their home counties. And Denver, and specifically Auraria campus, does a phenomenal job, as you look at our voter record, of being like, these are the resources for Denver County. And so like, I think there's always that confusion, and I've seen it every time I've come back to school at CU Denver, where it's like, oh, well, I know this would be the easy part, but if I go into that room, I can't actually vote because it turns out I'm not a Denver resident and I didn't even realize that. So it is just like Dina said, like sometimes, especially when you're younger, you don't know what county you belong to. And there is that awkwardness where it's like, well, I spend 50 hours a week in Denver County on this campus. So I think it's like, yeah, how can they, when you have so much on your plate, like how can you really be like, oh, I need to figure out what my county does? So I think it'd be phenomenal, like almost looping back to the earlier one, where we said there was very little almost that our campus could do directly, to have resources to be like, oh, if you live in this part of the map, here's the link to how you get involved to vote there. And I think that'd be a phenomenal redirection to see at like the Tivoli or something, where we are saying like, yes, this is complicated, unfortunately, and it does make sense to some degree why it's complicated, but like, let's take you having to think about this off the plate. Let's make it so where you can just be like, cool, I'm gonna get on the light rail and I'm gonna be back down in Arapahoe, and turns out there's a place where I can drop off my ballot that's right at that station. And I think that would be like, we got to remember that not everybody of us lives directly downtown, or in the case of Auraria, there's only 1,200 students that live directly on campus, and they're all CU Denver students, but most of them are actually registered out of state or out of that county anyways. So it's like, the Denver information is important because there's a decent amount of us, but that's not the end all for everybody on our campus.
Yeah, absolutely. At New Era, when we talk about like voting on your ballot, we use the metaphor of being like, it feels like you're taking a test that you don't know the answers to. And that's so hard when you don't even know how to get the tests, and then you don't even know what to do with the test when you're done with it. There's so many like steps along the way to navigate. And yeah, it makes so much sense when you're commuting and you're getting resources from a place that, you know, is more centered around somewhere you don't live. That can be really challenging. I'd love to hear, Dina, from you, you know, based on this feedback, what are your thoughts on how to really encourage voters to stay engaged? And in general, what would you say to voters who may be feeling discouraged or feel like their vote doesn't matter, especially when we're seeing, you know, issues we care about not necessarily passing right away, or not always seeing that huge impact, you know, right away?
First of all, I mean, I just thank you all so much. I'm going to be emotional. Dang it. I do get emotional about this. I grew up not voting. My parents didn't really vote. When I was a kid, I didn't go to the polls with them. It wasn't something that was baked in to my life. And I love the idea of baking it in from the beginning and normalizing it. And when I first started voting, because I was hanging around friends that were like in college, and it was like part of their life. And I was so ashamed that I was like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I'm really confused about these questions. I mean, so I see that, and I want to be able, I mean, I want to be able to make voting and the resources available, bake it in. I support, I mean, I'm so obviously emotional about it, and I apologize, but I'm so impressed with the discussion and where we're going. And I think we're all in the same direction. I would love to normalize voting for all of us, for everyone, regardless of how you vote. We don't care who you're voting for. We just want you to vote and participate in democracy, and to not be ashamed of asking for help and asking where resources are. So normalizing it, baking it in. Again, I'll tout our engagement and communications team. They've been doing an excellent job of starting some civics discussions, teaching kids how to run their own election, and really starting at baking it in. I'm just going to keep borrowing that, X. Thank you so much. To bake it in. And when you're discussing providing a centralized resource for all of the students on the campus, to be able to kind of go to one location and maybe find what it is, and to be able to provide that resource. Again, I'll say go votecolorado.com, just because the state does have a centralized, they're the trusted source, we're the trusted source, but go to the state's website to find out what county you're in, and then you know where to go. But that's one centralized place where they can start. But I would love the opportunity. I mean, these discussions are, I'm just so tickled about it. Provide a centralized resource on the campus so that anyone can go and find the information that they need. But having working groups or having groups for folks, not all of us have friends and family to sit around with and look at our blue books and have a bottle of wine, or, you know, a 6-pack of PBR, whatever it is. You know, it would be great to have some on-campus opportunities for folks that want to know and understand their ballot better. So just to provide a space for them to come, and a safe space so they can ask questions that they may be embarrassed for. But all of this to say is, like, of course, we're here to support, and I'm really glad to hear the direction that it's going. And, you know, I'd had my talking points written out and then get super emotional, but I fell into elections. I love what it is that I do. I'm an election administrator. And it's so important we build the foundation. I mean, voting turnout does affect change. Participation does affect change. So even when you feel disenfranchised, and for a large piece of America last year, they feel disenfranchised because of the way the election turned out. We just want to make sure that everyone still feels like they have that safe space and know that the election integrity is there, that your election administrators and your local election officials are there to provide you access to the ballot and make sure that your vote is counted and counted accurately. So thank you so much. I'm sorry I got emotional.
Emotions are good. And another cooking item I thought of was an iron skillet. I know everyone has had somebody in their family who's had an iron skillet, and like you wash it and you oil that skillet after the fact. And like if you get a good one, it gets passed down through the generations. And so when you're cooking with that iron skillet, it has all the flavors of the previous dishes that have been cooked. So I think voting is a cooking opportunity. Like, how do we cook, dine, serve? Like, I'm thinking about like the best holiday, not even holiday, the best meal with all of us. If we start really humanizing it and integrating it, it's going to be beautiful. So I'm excited for your work, Dina, and it's okay to be emotional.
Thank you.
This conversation has been so exciting to hear about how we're already talking about what change could happen on campus, how we can make sure that people have, you know, the resources that they need. And I also love a good, juicy metaphor. So thank you for that, X. Yeah, and so, you know, as we're continuing this conversation, if you have any questions, you know, about anything that we've shared, or, you know, questions about how to vote this year, please make sure that you're sending those in the chat. Something I know we kind of named was when it comes to voting, you know, you can drop your ballot in any county box, in any box in the state. If you want to vote in person, though, you should go to a voter service center that is in your county. And I believe many of them are open right now, which is really awesome. Yeah, and I also want to just name New Era as another resource. You know, you can always reach out to us unless we call you first, because we might. We love to make vote plans with people. It's something that I really enjoy doing. As we're waiting to see if we have anybody, you know, who has any questions, I'm curious to know from the panelists if you have any questions for each other.
Yeah, this is something that I don't know, is how do we get initiatives on the ballot? I think part of leveraging that voice that we all have mentioned for the young people earlier could be about how do we get initiatives on the ballot. So I'm curious if we can have that conversation.
I'd be happy to describe how it's done in Denver. And in my career, I've been the election administrator in a couple of other counties in Colorado and other states as well. And it's usually a two-lane approach. So the city council or county commissioners of your county can place items on the ballot. Special districts can as well. If you're in an area that has special districts, say they want to increase taxes to build a fence or something, they have an opportunity to add items. But as a regular day-to-day citizen that's not sitting on a board with access to adding items to the ballot, you can create a petition committee and submit a petition to your county. They look it over, look at the petition as to form, and give you the go-ahead to start circulating a petition. And each county is different for the number of signatures that are required, but there's always a petition avenue for folks that are looking to get an item on the agenda. You can also use the other route and go to the board meetings for your county commissioners or your city council members. And you have that public comment opportunity all of the time to speak to any items that are not on the agenda so that you can make your voice heard And that's one avenue, but the other is always the petition route. And any person that needs any assistance in wondering how the petition process works, we've got links on our website, and other counties do as well. But we also have subject matter experts in the office that are willing to direct you to the place to find the forms, how to get started. So there are those two avenues, and throughout Colorado, that's quite similar throughout the state.
Yeah, thanks for that question and for that bit of a rundown there, Dina. I love having conversations about, of course, voting, but then everything that like goes into it and that leads up to it. And part of that is, that petition gathering and, what do we do beyond that once we've elected our, candidates, how do we hold them accountable? How do we start having conversations? I think it's, there's a whole kind of civic engagement process, and it isn't just in that one moment where you cast your ballot. It's in all of the different ways that you have those conversations, which I know we've touched on a couple different times. So thank you for that. Any other questions or thoughts from our panelists?
I had a question. So when we were doing prep for this meeting, I actually found or was informed of a statistic that surprised me. Turns out younger voters actually have a higher tendency to be rejected because there's not as many signatures. How can we find out if our ballot's been rejected, and how do we fix that so it does get counted?
Well, luckily throughout the state, there's multiple options for that. So a ballot can be rejected if you fail to sign the envelope, or if your signature doesn't match, as you mentioned, Chris, because you may only have one signature on file, and maybe it's the signature from the DMV. And so if a ballot is rejected, if you vote by mail and your ballot is rejected, then within 2 business days, we'll send you a letter that says your signature was rejected because it appears to be discrepant. And you sign an affirmation, provide identification if it's required, and then return it in the mail. Luckily, you have until 8 days after the election to return that. So even if election day is over, you get that letter in the mail, because some folks are still dropping. I think I've heard both of you mention that you like to come maybe on election day and drop off. So if you come on election day and drop your ballot off with many other people, by the time it goes through the signature verification process, you may not get that letter until the 2-3 days after the election. So you still have that 5-day period to what we call cure. So you can cure that, so you can bring it into the office, and that cures your discrepant signature. And so anytime that you are going through the DMV, we would get an updated signature, but you can come into the office and update your address. One thing that's super important is that you know that your voter registration record is something that requires maintenance, like anything else in your life. If you move, you need to update your signature, update your address. It's something that requires maintenance, and that's part of our education to folks. Is when you move, there's a lot of government agencies out there, but we don't always talk to each other. And so that's one piece that's important. And I saw Todd, his beautiful face pipe up. So I want to defer to you if you have any other information to add to that, please.
Sure. In addition to a letter, we also send out ballot trace messages. So if you're enrolled in ballot trace, you'll get an email and or a text message that your ballot may be experiencing problems getting confirmed. And in addition to returning the affidavit by mail or by dropping it off with us, you can also cure your signature issue through our text to cure program. And cure it entirely on your cell phone. Just remember to take a photo of your ID when you're curing your ballot issues.
Thank you so much, Todd, for adding those. There's throughout the state, Denver uses ballot trace, but all of the other counties in the state use their own version of something that's similar to Denver's ballot trace, but there's multiple ways to be able to get those notifications if there's something that needs to be updated. So along the lines of maintaining your own voter registration information, opt into those services so that you get that text, so that you know that your ballot's been accepted, or if your ballot has been challenged for any reason, you'll know right away and you'll have the options to cure those.
And Dina or Todd, can you share a little bit more about how you sign up for Ballot Trace? How do you find, I think for Denver, I think you can just go to ballottrace.org and sign up. But how do you find it if you're not in Denver County?
You know what I'm going to say. GoVoteColorado.gov, I believe is the correct. Or visit your trusted source, which is your county. I believe the entire state of Colorado, all 64 counties are offering that opportunity to opt in. And you can opt in to receive a phone call on a landline, which my mom and dad still have. And that's the way that they get their messages. So you can opt in to receive emails, telephone calls, or text messages. So there's lots of opportunities for each method. So again, you'll hear me say over and over, the trusted source is your county clerk and recorder's election office, or govotecolorado.gov. Todd, do you have anything to add to that I missed?
No, govotecolorado.gov will get you there. Just look for the ballot notification services, or ballot tracks is what the state system is called. Or you can visit ballottracks.net.
Thank you.
Wonderful. That's so helpful. I always sign up for ballot tracing myself so that I can, get that notification right away, because I do not check my mail enough. And I know especially students living on campus, when I was a student living on campus, I checked it like once a month. So that's great to be able to get it in a more digital way that's a bit quicker, so you can cure that ballot and make sure that your vote counts.
Yes.
Great question there. Wonderful. Well, X, did you have another question that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I just had some curiosity for Dina and Todd, specifically around signatures and ballots. We have seen in our education systems, in some capacities, folks moving away from teaching like cursive and things of that sort. So I'm curious, on the signature side, could part of it be the inconsistencies in people, how they sign their signatures? I'm thinking when I used to work at a bank, at times we would process the transaction, and we have the client in front of us. We know them, their IDs match, but how they signed on that withdrawal slip is different than what may be in our signature history. So we would look through a series of imaged items that they had signed for to validate that. So I wonder if you all are doing that, or if you can add additional signatures that you might have to verify, because sometimes I add the D in my name, sometimes I just sign Antoine Johnson, and I'm like, is it that specific? So just had some curiosity around that.
I love that idea of signing your name 5 times on that, but I will I'll defer to Todd to get the official response and then add anything to it if I have anything extra. Todd?
Thank you, Dina. We do research all the signatures that we have on file for a voter before we send a rejection letter and a rejection notice via ballot trace. We do accept, for example, Bob for Robert and Hank for Henry. And we also are able to sort of follow along in the voter's signature evolution, if you will. So voters' signatures change very much from age of 16, when they may pre-register, through their college years. So the more signatures we have on file, the better. You are able to submit a paper form if your, for example, name is changed because of a marriage or a union. You can submit a paper form to us, and that's the best way for us to upload another signature. But in development, soon you'll be able to upload a signature through govotecolorado.gov, which will be very helpful.
Yep. Thank you, Todd. There were some interesting changes at the legislature this year that are going to make registering to vote online next year easier and providing a signature easier. And one piece, in addition to what Todd touched on, if you register to vote and used your middle initial and you sign your ballot and exclude that, we're looking at all of the other characteristics in your signature format. So, and then in the event that there are significant changes, you still have that opportunity to cure. Thank you.
Thanks. That was a really great question. I feel like we're all walking away knowing a little bit more about how we're going to vote this year, how we're going to cast our ballot and make sure that it's counted. So I'm really excited. I want to go ahead and close us out and thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for this super informative conversation. We'd also like to thank each of the schools for their participation in today's event, as well as the Office of the Clerk and Recorder, Paul D. Lopez, and Community College of Denver for collaborating with us on this event. You can find the recording of this conversation on the denvervotes.org website, that's denvervotes.org, and on the Office of the Clerk and Recorder's Facebook page. When it comes to casting your ballot, it is too late to mail in your ballot. So we recommend that now you drop it off using a 24-hour drop box or by visiting your nearest voting service and polling center today to get a ballot or vote in person. Just a reminder, ballots must be received by your county clerk by 7 p.m. on Tuesday, November 2nd. So get those ballots in. Remember, your vote is your voice. And thank you so much, everyone. Bye.